Some crimes are terrifying because of what we know. Others are terrifying because of what we may never know. The case of the man known as the Toy Box Killer belongs to the second kind. It is not just a story about violence. It is a story about fear so carefully constructed, so deliberately designed, that even now, years later, it feels less like a criminal case and more like a descent into a living nightmare. His real name was David Parker Ray, and for years in the desert of New Mexico, he is believed to have built a world of captivity, torture, and control hidden behind ordinary walls. At first glance, there was nothing extraordinary about him. He did not look like the monster people imagine when they think of evil. He was not a shadowy figure lurking in alleyways. He was a man who blended in. And maybe that is one of the most disturbing things about this case. Evil did not arrive screaming. It arrived wearing a human face so ordinary that people might not have looked twice. David Parker Ray lived in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, a quiet town with an almost surreal name for a case like this. Somewhere in that dry landscape, under that huge open sky, investigators would later discover what became known as the Toy Box, a trailer that, according to police, had been turned into a chamber built for unimaginable abuse. It was not chaotic. It was not impulsive. That is what makes it so chilling. It was methodical. The room had been prepared, equipped, organized. It suggested planning, repetition, and a level of cold intention that is hard to even process. This was not the story of a man who snapped in a moment of rage. This was something else entirely, something slower, darker, and far more deliberate. For years, rumors swirled around Ray. There were suspicions, stories, whispers that women had disappeared. But suspicion is not proof, and monsters often survive in the gap between what people fear and what they can actually prove. Then, in 1999, something happened that changed everything. A woman managed to escape. Her name was Cynthia Vigil. She had been taken to Ray's property, and what happened there would become the key that opened a door investigators had not been able to force open before. Cynthia escaped after a brutal struggle and ran for help, naked and terrified, wearing only a chain around her neck. That image alone is enough to freeze the blood. A person fleeing in absolute panic, not from a vague danger, but from something real, close, and waiting behind her. Her escape gave police what they needed. When investigators searched the property, they found the trailer, and inside it, they found a place that seemed designed to strip people of identity, dignity, and hope. But perhaps one of the most haunting parts of the case was not just the trailer itself. It was an audio tape Ray had made, a recorded message purportedly intended to be played for victims. Calm, cold, and horrifyingly detached, it laid out what was going to happen to them. It was not shouted, it was not frantic, it was controlled. That calmness made it even worse, because rage can feel human, even when it is monstrous. But cruelty delivered like routine, like procedure, feels like something else entirely. Investigators began trying to piece together how many victims there may have been, and that is where the case becomes even darker. Despite the horrific evidence, despite the testimonies, despite the trailer and the recordings, David Parker Ray was never convicted of murder. Many believe the number of his victims may have been far higher than what could ever be proven, but the truth remains uncertain. And uncertainty can be one of the cruelest parts of any true crime story. Families are left with questions. Possible victims are left unnamed. The dead, if they are dead, remain without justice. Ray did not act alone. As the investigation widened, attention turned to the people around him, including his daughter, Jessie Ray, and his girlfriend, Cindy Hendy. Hendy particularly played a direct role in the case uncovered through Cynthia Vigil's escape. The idea that a crime this terrifying may have involved multiple willing participants only made the public horror deeper. Because once again, the case reminded people of something they never want to believe. Sometimes evil is not solitary. Sometimes it becomes shared. normalized, even domestic. That is one of the most emotionally disturbing parts of this story. The toy box was not just a place of violence, it was a place built around total domination. The victims were not attacked in a single burst of madness. They were trapped in a system where another person had decided that their fear was entertainment, their pain was useful, and their survival was optional. It is difficult to imagine what that kind of terror does to the human mind. To wake up in an unfamiliar place, to realize you are not there by accident, to understand that the person speaking to you has rehearsed this before, that others may have come before you, that others may never have left. There is something especially horrifying about crimes built on ritual and repetition, not supernatural ritual, but human ritual, preparation, procedure, habit, the transformation of cruelty into routine. It suggests a person who no longer sees victims as people at all, only as objects to be controlled. And that, perhaps, is why the name Toy Box Killer has remained lodged in public memory for so long. Not because it sounds dramatic, but because it points to something deeply unnatural, the twisting of childhood language into a label for adult horror. A toy box should be a place of safety, imagination, innocence. In this case, the name became its opposite, a symbol of calculated terror. In the years after his arrest, David Parker Ray faced multiple charges related to kidnapping, torture, and sexual violence. But before the full weight of all suspicions around him could ever be tested in court, he died in 2002 of a heart attack while being transported for a hearing. And for many people, that ending felt deeply unsatisfying. No final confession, no complete accounting, no full list of victims. Just a man dying before the darkest questions around him could ever be fully answered. That is why this case continues to haunt people. Because it is not only about what was found, it's about what might still be missing. How many women crossed paths with David Parker Ray and were never seen again? How much suffering vanished into silence? How many warnings were dismissed because they sounded too terrible to be true? The story of the Toy Box Killer is not just about one man's cruelty. It's also about the terrifying power of secrecy, isolation, and control. It's about how predators can hide in ordinary places, about how some crimes survive for years, not because no one is afraid, but because fear alone is not enough to stop them. And beneath all the headlines, all the documentaries, all the infamous details, there were real victims, real women, real fear, real lives forever divided into a before and an after. That is the truth at the center of this case. Not the myth, not the nickname, not the shock value, just the unbearable reality that somewhere behind closed doors, one person decided that other human beings existed only for his power. And that is why this story is so difficult to forget. Because the greatest horror here was not mystery, it was intention.